wacha niite, kuna kijana anaitwa Kimani Ichung'wah.
Mulembe handi, muko sawa? Najua nimeongea na Omboko akaniambia mmeanza kuvuna mahindi hapa. Na nimesikia rais akisema unga inatoka wapi? Kwa shamba. Nyinyi mnaandamana shambani. Na mheshimiwa rais, nakubaliana na wewe. Hawa watu wa Mbale na Vihiga ni wangwana. Sababu wamesema maandamano yao ni kwa shamba, bei ya unga ishuke. Na muuzie wale wa maandamano, mnawauzia hiyo unga, mnaweka pesa mfukoni. Hii kazi nyingine ya maandamano, mimi naona tuachie rais afinye watu. Afinye asifinye? Afinye asifinye? Afinye asifinye? Awafinye? Rais, sababu ni kweli, huwezi ambia watoto wa wamama wengine waende wakaandamane, wapigane na mawe, wafinywe, na wako umewafungia kwa nyumba na unaweka kwa nyumba huko Nairobi na mabunduki kwa nyumba. Simuliona wengine jana wakilalamika ati watoto wao wanasumbuliwa, na wewe umeweka bunduki 20 kwa nyumba. Ni vita gani unapigana na bunduki 20 kwa nyumba yako? Unalia eti mama yako anasumbuliwa. Kwani sisi hatuna mama zetu? Wewe uko na mama yako mtu ya Mbale? Si uko na mama yako nyumbani? Si amesumbuka? Amesumbuka na njaa, amesumbuka na vijana kukosa ajira. Na huyu rais akipangia vijana ajira, wewe unakuja kumpigia kelele ati amesumbua mama yako. Hata wewe ujue sisi pia tuko na mama zetu. Na tuko na watoto ambao kupitia maandamano wewe unafanya wapigwe tear gas, unafanya wapigane na polisi, unafanya wengine wakufe bure, unazuia wengine waende shule. Na tunataka tukuambie, wale watoto hawaendi shule, ni watoto wamezaliwa kama hao wako wenye umeweka kwa nyumba na umejaza bunduki kwa nyumba. Na tujiulize, unaweka bunduki zaidi ya 20 kwa nyumba, na watu Nairobi wanapigwa risasi ili polisi wawekelewe ndio wamepiga wengine risasi, na ni bunduki zinatumiwa, na unakuja kutuambia niko na bunduki iko licensed. And for the record, Your Excellency, nilisema jana pale Kangemi polisi walipigwa risasi na watu wako na bunduki ati kwa maandamano. Na tumejua, na napongeza Wizara ya Interior na polisi kwa uchunguzi kujua that some of those licensed gun owners are the ones who are giving their arms and their firearms to go and kill innocent people in the streets and put it on the police that it is the police that are executing people. Yet it is you who are executing our people so that you can blame our police and see if you can instigate insurgency in Kenya. La mwisho rais, nilisikia mwingine jana anasema ati I am a Democrat because I even handed over power. You never handed over power because you are a Democrat. You handed over power because the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya obligates you to hand over power. You never did us any favor. Mtu asijifanye that he did us a favor by handing over power. You handed over power because it is a constitutional obligation that you have to meet. All we are asking you today, you are also obligated by the Constitution. Katiba inakuobligate wewe. Ufikirie wewe ni mtoto wa nani ama wa nani. Ufuate sheria na ufuate katiba. Usiambie watoto wenyewe wauawe wewe ukijitafutia makuu. Kweli si kweli watu wa Mbale? So tuachie rais afinye watu. Afinye. Afinye. Na ajenge nyumba. Vijana wapate ajira. Tupate pesa kwa mfuko. Si hiyo ndio kazi? Si hiyo ndio kazi huyu hasla aliomba? Ainue mahasla wengine. Mko tayari Mbale? Hebu nione wangapi wako tayari, wangapi wako tayari? Asante.
Haya. Mlembe. Abantu ba Mbale mlembe. Haya menga mmoni. Mimi kwanza nishukuru nyinyi, sababu kwa hizo siku 3 ambazo tulikuwa hapa, watu wakisema mambo ya maandamano, Bwana Rais, watu wa Vihiga wamekuwa na amani, na mimi nawashukuru kwa ku maintain amani katika sehemu yetu. Mlembe, wacha niwaambie hivi, mtu asije akawadanganya siku ingine ifwa bandu ba Mbali, Vihiga pamoja na Muhaya kunyala kubala olla bandu ba Kisumu tawe. Inywe si mulabaluya munyala khola mangana kalira. Wacha niwaambie, wakati wale watu wengine walikuwa ndani ya serikali, tulipata maji, tumepata leo ama hatukupata? Hatukupata. Hii ni wakati yetu, tuko ndani ya serikali, tujiangalie tupate maendeleo. Bwana Rais, nakimalizia nikupigia asante kubwa sana. Kwa miaka 10 ilipita ya serikali ile ilitoka, wale walimu waliajiriwa walikuwa 40,000. Wewe kwa miezi 7 umeajiri walimu 55,000. Makofi kwa Bwana Rais. Na tena umeahidi utaendelea kuwaajiri mpaka wafike 1,100. Asante sana. Kuna vitu viwili namalizia. Pale hapa Muhaya, Bwana Rais uliahidi utatupatia barabara. Saa hii barabara ya Msusui kuenda Kumsalaba iko vibaya sana. Tafadhali utengenezee hiyo barabara. Hao wananchi wanatarajia mbolea, na mzuri umeongea. Si mnataka mbolea? Wangapi wanataka mbolea msimu huu? Kwa hivyo mbolea iguje ili watu wetu waweze kupanda mahindi. Na Rais usisahau Ebunangwe TTI. Asante sana, Nyasabe nenywe.
Kwa sababu niko na mpango ya barabara. Mimi niko na mpango ya barabara ya hapa Vihiga. Kuna pesa nimeweka katika barabara zenu, na mimi nataka kuja kuzianzisha na kuzikamilisha zile zingine. Kuna mpango ya stima, mimi nitakujia hapa. Kuna mpango ingine mingi, mimi nitakujia hapa. Munasema nirudi hapa Vihiga kabla ya Disemba? Mutanikaribisha? Nikuje nilale ama nikuje niende? Nikikuja kulala mutanipanga? Mutanipanga vizuri? Haya. Sasa kwa sababu mimi nimefika hapa, mbali na maji, hapa tuko na shule yetu ya Friends. Si ndio? Hapa Mbale. Waziri wangu wa maji yuko hapa, anaitwa Alice Wahome. Mimi nataka nimwambie Waziri Alice, wale vijana wa pale Mbale walikuwa wameniuliza mambo ya maji na wamekukumbusha leo. Mimi nataka nimwambie Alice, tafuta milioni 10, tengeneza maji ya hiyo shule ya Mbale, weka borehole, weka water tank. Hatutaki tena kusikia shida ya maji pale Mbale High School. Vile vile kwa sababu na waziri mwenyewe yuko hapa. Hiyo ni sawa waziri? Waziri amekubali. Sasa hapa vile vile huyu mtu yenu anaitwa Msloya ananisumbua sana. Ananiambia ati kuna shule inaitwa Idabaga. Iko hapa. Hii. Haya. Sasa wewe Sloya, nitakusaidia shilingi milioni 2 ya hiyo shule. Pia kuna shule ya Mbale Primary. Iko wapi hiyo? Iko hapa. Nitakupatia shilingi milioni 2 ingine upeleke kwa hiyo shule. Muendeleshe hiyo shule isonge mbele. na iko shule ingine inaitwa Elunza. Hii Elunza ni kusema nini? Iko hapa chini. Pia nitampatia shilingi milioni 2 apeleke huko kwa hiyo shule, na mfanye maneno ya watoto wasome. Na iko shule ingine nasema inaitwa Ondeyo. Hii Ondeyo ni kusema nini? Hata hiyo pia nitasaidia yeye. Wewe unifuate kwa ofisi, nitakupatia shilingi milioni 8 ugawe kwa hiyo mashule. Sawa sawa. Watu wa Vihiga, si tumekubaliana jameni? Mnakubali tusukume hii gurudumu pamoja? Wacha nimwambie Omwami Musalia, ngoja. Kuna huyu mama anaitwa Jackie Mwenesi. Wacha wasalimie.
Wandu wa Vihiga Mirembe! Mirembe kandi! Mimi nataka kuambia hivi watu wa Vihiga. Tulipatia rais 39%. Lakini mheshimiwa rais na Musalia wakatukumbuka. Nimesikia wengine wakisema shares. Nataka mnisikie vizuri watu wa Vihiga. Ile madharau ambayo huyu kijana wetu anaonyesha kwa sababu ya shares, nataka kuambia president akiwa hapa 2027 tutapiga 70%, madharau itaisha. Watu wa Vihiga vijana jambo la pili nataka kusema ya kwamba nataka mtulie mnisikilize. Unajua mimi kwa ile muda kidogo rais aliniteua kama waziri, alafu Raila akaenda kotini. Nimejifunza mambo mengi sana, na kama kiongozi wa Vihiga Mheshimiwa Musalia amenipa mkono. Nataka msikie niwatangazie, kiongozi yoyote ambaye atadharau Musalia Mudavadi hapa Vihiga hautakanyaga. Musalia! Musalia! Jambo la mwisho, nataka mnisikie vizuri watu wa Vihiga. Unajua rais tulimpatia kura, si ndio? Hii maneno rais mnashida mkilialia, mtuambie hiyo mkuki ambayo ulishika sio ya kulala na mwanamke. Kama mtu anakusumbua finya yeye, na kama umeshindwa utuambie. Jambo la mwisho watu wa Vihiga, nataka msikie vizuri sana. Nataka muangalie huyu kijana. Watu wote angalieni huyu. Musalia! 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 Nikimalizia sikieni. Wacha nifunge nikisema hivi. Kama wewe ni mwanaume na umetosha, hata kama tuna shares ndogo tumekubali, na unaona Musalia kila saa mnasema ni muoga, patia bibi yako kwa 6 minutes na unipatie majibu. Asanteni sana, Mwenyezi Mungu awabariki.
Hawa jamaa wanasema ni wakalie wale watu ngumu. Lakini unajua mimi sasa ndio baba yao ya kila watu hawa. Hawa pole mpaka wataingia laini. Si ndio? Hakuna haja ya kuwapinya, nitawapanga. Hawa nitawapanga pole mpaka wataingia kwa laini. Si namna hiyo? Hapa tuko na mzee wetu anaitwa Francis Atuoli. Mzee wetu
Mrembe bosi, mrembe handi, injirania, murabandu balia, injirania, murabandu balia, ya wanahuli, murabandu balia, wa musaliari nendo muhongo brujuesha alo nuwahuli, muhulile, basi kuchende urande bakupirorio, kulokora kutia kumiyanda, ikari kario.
Sichiraji bila hizi ndizi ndio khabata ikari kario. Sisi tulijaribu na William alikuwa well organized na akashinda, sisi tukiwa kwa Azimio, si namna hivyo. Na kitu kilifanya tupoteze, sijui kama mliangalia television jana, kama mngeliona vile aliyekuwa mkubwa wetu vile alivyokuwa naongea, mnaweza shinda kura, mnaweza shinda kura. Sasa sisi zote basi sisi sote watu wa Western chini ya uongozi wa Musalia Mudavadi tuko hapa pahali William Samoei Ruto yuko. Mnasikia hivyo? Asanteni sana kwa kusimama na yeye. Asanteni sana watu wa magharibi kukataa kwa mambo mengine ya maandamano, mambo mengine, na Mungu awasaidie. Asante.
Ya kwamba tutapangana na yeye mambo ya Emusuti barabara, nitakuja kupanga Emusire DCC, nitakuja kuongea na wewe tupange vizuri, na TTI na TTC ya Bunyore na Ebunangwe mimi nitakuja mwenyewe. Sawa mheshimiwa? Haya, wacha tuko na swadi hapa, mpigeni makofi. Tuko hapo na mama nani? Haya, tuko na watu wengi hapo. Wacha nipatie Musalia akamilishe hii mkutano. Musalia, karibu.
Mirembe, nataka tutambue tulikuwa na wa MCAs wetu wote walikuwa hapa. Nataka tutambue kwamba tulikuwa hapa na Professor Chwea ambaye anashikilia Kenya School of Government. Tuko hapa na Yusuf Chanzu ambaye ni National Housing Corporation. Tuko hapa na waziri ndugu yangu Rashid kutoka Mumias. Tuko hapa na Secretary General wa UDA Cleo Malala. Tuko hapa na ndugu yangu kutoka Emuhaya Asingo. Asante. Na wengi. Mheshimiwa Rais, hawa vijana wamenikaza sana. Wanasema kuna stadium, wanataka stadium mbili, ile ya Kidundu na ingine Mohaya Ebunangwe. Hawa wanasema, na hata Hamisi wanasema wanataka hiyo Kenya School of Government ijengwe na mabarabara. Nani huyu? Aya, sema jambo.
Vijana oye! Vijana oye! Kwanza, kitu ya kwanza nataka kuwapongeza sana. Niliongea na nyinyi mkanisikia kuhusu maneno ya maandamano. Tulikataa maandamano tukataa. Tulikataa maandamano tukataa. So kuanzia next week wajaribu kuingia Vihiga. Hata bwana president asiseme.
Here's how I built Plant Manager, the robot that we used to water all of our office plants in just 2 days. Using Via. Via makes it easier than ever to bring your cool robotics project to life. It bridges the gap between hardware and software so that you can go from an idea on paper to prototype to production faster than ever. Do you want to try VM? There's a way to do it without any hardware setup required. Click to try it out for yourself.
Big picture time, guys, and we've got a bonus episode for you. We thought we were done with the season, but here's one. Why are you so loud about what's going on in the country?
So we should not be paying debt. Now I say this because this is the biggest problem we are facing on the government account. It is the biggest reason The biggest for the high cost of living. The sovereign, which is you and I,
Yeah.
do not owe anybody anything. And anybody who put their pen to that paper is the biggest liar. It's a fake budget, it's a fake finance bill, and we must call it out for that. They are sinking us further and further.
What then is the solution?
We must deal with the biggest outflow of our tax revenue, which is the debt.
Big picture time, guys, and we've got a bonus episode for you. You thought we were done with the season, but here's one more. And on an important subject, we're returning to that thing that you've been asking us to talk about, the economy, debt, inflation, our future as the country that is Kenya, and our future, I guess, as Africans as well, because this is hitting African countries like never before. Now, there's been someone who's been going from pillar to post to talk about inflation, to talk about the debt situation. And he's one of the most surprising proponents of a complete shift in how we do things in this country, given that he's been very invested in this country's economy prior to what's been happening over the past 10 years or so. Mr. Jimmy Wanjigi, businessman and, now politician, social commentator. What else should we call you now? Yeah.
Politician.
Yes. This is a very interesting...
But a different kind of politician.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting hat that you're wearing now.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming to our studios here to discuss this. Now, before we get started, I want to introduce a gentleman behind you. His name is Tom Mokwana. So Tom, yeah.
Hi.
Yeah. So Tom and Tracy and a bunch of us here do fact-checking on a regular basis. And so part of the thing that we do on this show is try and educate people about different misinformation, disinformation, on various things. And so, of course, because you're here today, it'll be about the economy, right? Yeah. Yes. So, Tom, what
facts and figures?
Facts and figures, right? So, what do we have to do, Tom?
Facts about the percentage of revenue that goes to servicing debt. Things are made online, and also facts to do with some documents about poverty levels in Kenya.
Okay.
Yeah, documents by Mr. Jimmy
Wanjigi.
Yes.
All right.
But he's here to respond.
I think he's talking about the stuff that you have in this Money Heist pamphlet that you have here. So, Jimmy, let's get straight into it, right? You are, as I had mentioned in this introduction, you are one of the, I guess, an outside voice in a sense, in terms of the kind of commentary and the kinds of things that you've been proposing recently. And some who know you as, a very shrewd businessman would wonder, why is Jimmy Wanjigi piping up at this time about the economy? So, Jimmy, why? Why are you so loud about what's going on in the country?
John Allen, let me first say that it's good to be here, and thank you for the invitation. And especially over such an important topic, because there's something that we have been crying for a very long time. Our nature over the last 60 years of our politics has not been about the economy. The country has talked about political reforms and all sorts of shenanigans over the years, and we have progressed greatly. But this is the first time the economy has taken center stage, which tells you that we're at a period of economic liberation.
Yeah.
Somehow or another, the last 60 years of our lives have not brought us the economic changes that we as a people have sought, and that our forefathers fought for this independent country. So we are now at a stage where our general population is understanding this concept of economy. From the price of goods, they're understanding inflation, they're understanding debt, they're understanding a government's role. They were never here, right? They even understanding neocolonialism. So we have advanced at such a stage that the last elections, if you recall, a lot of our slogans and those of others was that this is an economic revolution. It is the third liberation to our nation. Now that history is very important, because you must understand that even when we were colonized, it was about an economy of our colonizers.
It was an extractive
economy. Now, this has been the issue. And over the years, we have been unable to really grasp this issue. It is actually the moment when we are saying we must be empowered. Now, my view during the elections, which we were stopped, was that we are carrying on basic economic philosophies and policies with the players that were presented to us that have been there and have not worked. And that is basically what you call demand side economics, where government is the driver of growth. The government is the one that is going to create employment, right? And this has been exasperated after what we have seen out of devolution and so on. Government is everything. You've seen the public sector thriving with government tenders, government being the driver. And some of us have been of the belief that long time ago, in fact over 10 years ago, after I believe we stabilized in the regime of Kibaki, this is now a time for supply side economics, where the private sector drives it.
Before we get into that, I mean, you're right about the intensity of the movement, but perhaps it's not the first time that Kenya has faced such an intense period. I mean, 30 years ago, you look back to 1993, and we were in the doldrums, in essentially almost like a copy-paste of what's happening today, right? So we had a very serious debt crisis. We had a very serious leadership crisis as well. And the country was considering various, very deep-set changes to the economy driven by the International Monetary Fund. That, one would argue, gave way 10 or so years later to the Kibaki presidency, which was a golden era in terms of the regeneration of the economy. But that's why I'm wondering why you want to shift the economic model and not fix the leadership, because these economic principles that we're applying in this country have worked elsewhere. It's not that big government is such a problem that it can't work. The problem has been and continues to be corruption, leadership, misgovernance, things that have an impact on the economy but are not the system, the economic system itself. So why talk about a shift to supply side economics when we still have the same players and the same problems with integrity?
Those were my exact views during the election of last year. But let's go back to a bit of history of what you've talked about in 1993. Yes, those were the problems. And after the 92 elections, the government of President Daniel Arap Moi, I think it was 1995, went to Paris Club, because at the time most of our debt was under the bilaterals that fall under Paris Club. And they sought debt rescheduling. I remember the minister at the time, I think there was Honorable Kemo. And they sought debt rescheduling, which removed debt as an entire burden to a budget. So by the time Mwai Kibaki was coming in 2002, yes, he found a -1 GDP growth rate, first ever in the Republic of Kenya, and the last. But he did not carry over debt. That was one big relief that he had. He did not have the burden of debt that he carried on in 2003. Now, with that relief, Mwai Kibaki actually applied supply-side economics. He literally removed the barriers to the private sector's growth. Look at your media, for example. At the time, you had only 2 TV stations, 1 radio station. He removed the barriers so that the private sector in the media could boom and marketing boom, because now we could spread our products, whatever we were producing, to a greater market, greater reach. And that's what he did. He actually applied supply-side economics. That was his model. He stimulated the economy with free primary education. Where he said, that will take on as a burden, but I give you back money. And that caused a big catalyst, because you then had money in your pocket and you could do something else with it. Went back into the economy as a stimulus. Now, his was supply side. And he did everything to remove the barriers to the private sector growing, right? And government came in a very strong way, unfortunately. But let me say unfortunately, because it was a bit of a contradiction to supply side. But he needed to boost infrastructure, because there was a very big gap with a -1 GDP that Moi had done. It can tell you that we had stopped growing. So there was a very big gap in infrastructure. But look at what he did. He did roads, they worked on our water, they worked on our fiber optics. All of this, we have become so-called a modern Kenya because of Mwai Kibaki. And he had to start moving us in that direction to bridge the gap. So government was still a big player. But I can assure you the private sector grew. That's why taxation grew from an estimated 180 billion in revenue under the Moi regime to, by the time Mwai Kibaki left, to almost 1 trillion. Right? It grew over 10 years. Right? Cumulatively over 10 years. Now, that worked. Uhuru inherited an economy that was at 6, almost 7% growth rate. He found the coffers were full. They were not empty. But what did the government do? It adopted a style of demand side. Government is the driver of everything. It took our debt from what was then about 18% to what I'm saying today is heading towards 80% of our revenue. This is what happened with demand side.
Heading to, but it's not there yet. Some estimates put it at 63, others put it at 67.
I would like to give you some details as to where we are drawing that from. We have the actual statement of revenue and exchequer issues as of 28th April. There's one due now for May. Now, it says here, our tax revenue was estimated, revised to 2.1 trillion for this financial year. As of April, end of April, we've collected 1.573 trillion.
So there's a deficit.
Now, that deficit is May and June, right?
The last 2 months.
The last 2 months.
Yeah.
We've averaged this at about 150 billion a month. So you add it. So we're saying you get just over 1.8. You can then calculate, because our debt figure, also from the Treasury, as payments this financial year is 1,360,985,941. So almost 1.4 trillion. Calculate the percentage. That's not 65%.
No, of course, it's largely, but it's floating between 60 and 70%.
Have you calculated the percentage difference?
No, I haven't yet. So of course, it's now, out in the open that the past 10 years were disastrous in a sense when it comes to debt and taking on debt. But again, I see this very much as still a problem, not so much with the debt itself. Of course, debt is a huge, huge contributor to the kind of things that we're experiencing now. But it is the use of the debt, where that money went, right? That is a concern, because if you're going to borrow $2 billion in a Eurobond, you should expect to see some sort of multipliers in the economy, right? We didn't witness that. That doesn't seem to be a problem of taking the loan. It seems to be a problem with the people who are using the loan. And that's a leadership problem, not so much the fact that it was a demand-driven economy. Again, so that's why I'm asking why your grouse isn't with leadership, but more with trying to open up the economy.
What I'm trying to do, John Allen, is say that this model of demand side, driven by this leadership that we have witnessed, has not worked for Kenya. And it's time to put the power of our economy in private hands.
It hasn't worked.
Now, it hasn't worked. And not only corruption, and I'll say, apart from corruption, there has been a complete delinquency. People here do not follow the law. They do not follow the law, and even aside from corruption, they do not, and it's most frightening.
But that,
the 2010, the 2010,
that's a
corruption is one issue,
and that misgovernance, mismanagement is similar.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah,
this is such a serious problem. We cannot ignore it anymore. Our debt is anchored in our constitution, and yet it is being flouted every single day. The law says our budget is where our debt is anchored. And our budget is 3 bills. What Parliament passes are 3 bills. One which is being debated today called the Finance Bill, which comes to take our revenue. And then 2, the appropriations, which is you're going to hear in the budget. And there are 2 appropriations books. One is called Development Appropriations. The other is budget recurrent.
Recurrent, yeah.
Now, our debt is anchored in our laws from the Constitution right up to Public Finance Management Act in appropriations development. Now, over the last 10 years, our parliament, which passes our debt, has approved in budget appropriations 2 trillion. We did an audit, a forensic audit. And that audit came out and said 2 trillion was approved by parliament.
Yeah.
2. But what does it say in our statement at Treasury, at Central Bank?
Our debt stock is what? It's, let's see.
This was up to April last year, right? We had said that we audited right up to April last year.
Yeah.
And Parliament had approved 2 trillion. Now, at the Central Bank, it said that the last 10 years, 9 years at the time, the government had taken 6 trillion. In fact, 6.1 trillion.
Yeah. And our debt
So they
stock
took,
now is at 9.1.
well, I don't even want to go there yet.
Yeah.
It's very frightening where we are. Now, 6.1 trillion, and we have approved 2.
Yeah.
It means that they borrowed 4 trillion above what is approved by Parliament. So which leaders are you talking about? Because you see, Parliament is the only place that approves debt. Now that debt of 2 trillion that was approved by Parliament did go to projects. They are line items.
Yeah.
This road was built. This bridge was done. This water project was done. This was the debt. This was taxpayers' revenue towards that project.
Yeah.
It's all in a schedule. But this 4 trillion, above which was not approved by Parliament, we don't know where it went. Because it couldn't have gone for a project.
Yeah.
So when you talk about corruption in that sense, I'm saying it didn't go to a project. So you can't talk about development.
Yeah.
We don't know what this money was.
Or where it
right?
went.
Or where it went. Because it was not approved according to our laws.
Yeah. So
Okay.
this is the question that you've been raising about odious debt.
Now it's very frightening because you take the 6.1 trillion that was taken under the Uhuru government. In other words, the 2 approved by Parliament
plus the 4.
Plus the 4.
Plus what's happening, currently. Because
even before we go currently,
year, yeah.
We said, why is the figure at Central Bank showing 8.4? Right? We're seeing 6.1 here. So 1.1 trillion not approved, 2 trillion approved. So we found a carryover from Mwai Kibaki of 2.3. So it reconciled. This was April last year, 8.4. Right? Now, that was now the balance at Central Bank, saying that we owe 8.4. Now, you see what it presupposes is that we are never paying. We are just taking, but we are never paying.
Not paying back, yeah.
But you go to the budget recurrent, appropriations recurrent. And there, the budget appropriation recurrent carries 3 main items. One is salaries, one is debt payments, right? And the other is what is called operations for government.
Yeah.
In that, our audit showed just simple calculation that we over the last 9 years paid 5.6 trillion. So why is it never being credited to this debt that we are seeing in our statement of account at Central Bank?
Yeah. Where even if we use the current figures now of 9.1 trillion.
Yes. Where's the 5.6?
Where's the 5.6?
Where's the 5.6? Right? So we hold the assertion that the sovereign, which is you and I, do not owe anybody anything. Because we approved 2. We can say the debt carried over from Mwai Kibaki of 5.3 is accurate. 2.3 rather is accurate. So that was a debt of 4.3. Inclusive of interest, by the way.
Yeah.
We have paid 5.6.
So we've
So the Kenyan sovereign has a credit in the account of over $1 trillion. Right? So we should not be paying debt. Now I say this because this is the biggest problem we are facing on the government account.
Yeah.
Now I like to repeat this in very simple terms. If you were earning 100,000 shillings and you went to ask for a bank loan that is more than 30,000 shillings,
Yeah.
right? On the basis of revenue of 100,000 shillings, the bank will tell you that is the maximum. 30% of your revenue to take as a debt, that's your maximum. Right? Because if you take more than that, you're going to have to find a way of borrowing somewhere else to meet your lifestyle. A country is very similar.
Well, similar to the extent that, you know, those terms do apply, but countries are different in that you can extend the term of the loan.
No.
Yeah.
It is a question of revenue. How much of your revenue is going to pay debt? That is the crank. Right? Never forget that yardage. If we were at 18% of our revenue, 18 shillings of every 100 going to pay debt, and we pass 30, you enter immediately in economic terms what is called a debt trap. All right? You need more and more money to service your debt and your operations. That is why we have been increasing.
So by this argument, then Kenya got into a debt trap in 2015 when, you know, I think the debt to GDP ratio was, I think it was 48% thereabouts, right? So just over that 30%.
Now, I don't like to use the debt to GDP ratio because it's look at America's debt to GDP ratio.
Yeah.
Right? I can't remember the figure, but I know it's more than even ours. But if you look at the repayment of debt, debt servicing ratio, it is only 13%. And you can see the kind of wars you are seeing in Congress over raising the debt ceiling. And there are 13% of their revenue going to pay debt. In fact, it's one of the things I intend to present to Parliament on this debate of the debt ceiling, right? And debt being anchored to GDP. I would like to see debt being anchored to our revenue servicing capacity. So when you pass 30%, we passed that, I agree, around 2015 or so.
2015,
right? Now, when you pass that, you enter a debt trap. You need more and more debt to service your life. This is why we are where we are, principally. The second is that we've also had a big drop in the shilling. Right? And if you take our debt stock, especially in dollars, remember we have to raise shillings to pay for those dollars. We've estimated of late that with the current foreign debt stock, every shilling we drop is between 38 and 40 billion shilling increase in our debt, which is a very frightening figure. We are dropping almost a shilling every week, every 2 weeks. Right? It's now 140 something.
It's 141 as we speak.
It is very frightening. Just the other day it was 120. So you're looking at that and saying we're headed towards, just on depreciation of the shilling, an increase in debt of another 1 trillion, 800, almost 1 trillion. We're heading there. That is very frightening because we cannot see an end to it.
But there's a precedent in how things can work out, right? So Ghana had a similar balance of payments, crisis. How they worked it out was that they're trying to renegotiate to start paying off their debts in cedis, right? So that takes pressure off of the economy in terms of looking for dollars to be able to do that. We're in a conversation right now with the International Monetary Fund, possibly for a similar arrangement or the extension of the term of our debts. The problem, though, are our commercial lenders. How do you negotiate with guys like that?
I would like to address this in a different way, so that we are keeping to the problem statement. Right? Why we have a bad economy. Government has been driving the economy. So when you look at government expenditure, right? Government expenditure, the biggest item outflow of its expenditure is debt. Right? It's not counties, it is not salaries, it is debt. That is why we have a problem. And it's eating more and more of our revenue every year. The next financial year, it is 1.7 trillion from 1.4 to be paid out.
Because of the Eurobond repayments next year.
Yes. To be paid out is 1.7 at today's exchange rate. We don't know what it will be tomorrow or the day after. It may get to 2 trillion payout
Isn't
in the next financial year.
Isn't the estimation by some people that the dollar could go up almost to 200?
It's the most frightening thing. I don't even like to imagine that because our life will become horrific here. It's already horrific. Now that will be untenable. Now, if that is the biggest payment, that means government is sapping revenue from the private sector, from commercial banks, in order to operate. Because if it's 80% as we're estimating of our revenue going to debt, government then needs, in terms of, we're giving a 100% sort of term. So let's say 100 shillings, 80 is going to debt.